Sorry, Anderson.
Hi, my name's Don. Welcome back to Game Brain. Reflecting back on the most memorable moments in gaming this past decade, few carry as much weight as Titanfall 2's stellar time travel level, Effect and Cause. And today we'll be hearing from the level's main creator, designer Jake Keating, who's still working at Respawn Entertainment today. Jake's career in game design came later in life, cutting his teeth at Texas developer Terminal Reality, designing Blood Rain 2. But big-chested vampires were not Jake's destiny, as he eventually made his way into Infinity Ward just as they began work on Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, and when most of the team jumped ship and formed Respawn Entertainment in 2010, he followed.
Take your squad up this road. It was a pretty exciting time. We're starting from ground zero. We didn't necessarily know what type of game we were going to make. Those early days, we didn't necessarily even have computers. We had office space and a bunch of chairs that we would sort of put in a circle and go around the room kind of like a therapy session and just talk about games that we liked or games that we'd like to make. Those early days were pretty formative in kind of instilling in our mind, I think, that we could kind of make whatever we want. As corny as it sounds, the imagination was the only limit. Although at the time we didn't have an engine, so we had to figure that part out as well.
Ready in 15 seconds.
Respawn shipped their debut title, Titanfall, in 2014 to mostly universal critical acclaim, but the lack of a fleshed out single-player campaign drew similarly universal criticism, and became a key focus for the team for the inevitable sequel.
It was super positive. I think after Titanfall 1, there was probably a lot of pent-up, sort of delayed gratification for the guys that wanted to work on a single-player game, because it wasn't like we didn't want to do it in Titanfall 1. We definitely started doing it. We even created a few levels. People were working on prototypes, but it just wasn't in the cards. We didn't have enough manpower. We were kind of operating on a skeleton crew, and there just kind of came a fork in the road where we had to say, you know, are we going to try to do single player and multiplayer, or focus on one? And so the appetite, I think, was huge once we did get started on Titanfall 2 for people to kind of sink their teeth into a more traditional single player campaign. It was just a super exciting time, honestly. I think one of the best things we did at the start of that process, when we said, yes, we're gonna do it, we're gonna make a single player campaign for real this time, is we opened up the idea of what that campaign could be to just a whole lot of freewheeling experimentation without a whole lot of rules. And that was, you know, what we called the action block phase, which we used to dub these little prototypes that designers would go off and create. It got more structured over time, but initially it was literally a case of, hey, we're gonna make a single player campaign, go off and do whatever you want, as long as it's trying to solve a design problem. And I think that early stage of just not having any rules and just having that sort of free-form experimentation really formed this sort of rich petri dish of ideas and possibilities for what could be in the campaign. And I think it translated directly to informing the overall character of the final campaign.
And there's some footage of the action block prototype for Effect and Cause, which gives an idea of the early stages of development. How do you reflect on that early prototype compared to how the final level turned out?
It was fun to go back and watch the footage, because I hadn't seen it for a while. I hadn't seen it since Soupy's GDC talk, where he was showing some of that early action block footage of all of our levels and ideas. And so the one thing I was struck by was just how dependent and thankful we are for every other department that we work with. Because if you put that prototype next to the final level, it's just shocking the amount of love and care that went in from every department, from art to audio to effects, I mean even code, for getting different lighting in each realm.
Move back!
And once we had sort of a solid structure to fit the level into, a lot of fat got trimmed, a lot of encounters got combined, and it really began to take shape as it had these sort of solid story beats to kind of structure around as well. At one point in the development of the level, we thought that BT was not even with you. Like, you arrived at the facility and he had just died in the previous level. He had sacrificed himself. And so you were coming here alone. And the idea was not only were you trying to solve this sort of time puzzle that was going on, but this facility also happened to be the place where they manufactured BT and where he kind of like came off the assembly line. So not only were you trying to solve this mystery and figure out the whole time travel nonsense, but you were also trying to find your friend. It was definitely compelling, and it probably could have worked too, but we ditched that idea once we started seeing how the rest of the game was shaping up and went in a different direction.
And time manipulation's used a lot in video games. It's usually as simple as slowing things down, like bullet time, or Prince of Persia Sands of Time-esque rewinding time, but the notion of having two separate realities operating on top of each other, how easy was that to manage? Did it become overwhelming mentally to try and have those two different overlapping levels in your mind at the one time?
Nah, it was a piece of cake. No, it was the biggest thing, the biggest time sink, not just for myself, but for every other department that got dragged into the black hole of this level. We made this bed early on to say, okay, well, in order for this thing to work, we're gonna have to have multiple versions of a level running simultaneously. And you make this cardinal rule in level design a lot of the time, which is try to reuse your geometry, try not to blow through it too fast. And I think that might even be one of the reasons we were attracted to that hub and spoke concept, was that, oh, we can create this hub, we can come back to it, we can reuse the geo. Then along comes this level, Effect and Cause was just the worst offender of doing exactly not that. So the lecture hall is a perfect example. You go in there, you don't even have any weapons, there's nothing to shoot at, and it's just exposition, and it changes from a pristine state back to the present state where it's overgrown. You see all these animations of guys turning around and looking at you. You have the speaker up front giving a speech. You have a giant hologram effect. I mean, you've got every department working on that level, on that one scene, and it's over in 3 seconds. And there's not even much of a payoff. If you interrupt the speaker and use the audio log, you will get a time travel gag because you will interrupt him on the audio log as well.
We will in fact safeguard the existence of the human race, extending... Yes, pilot, may I help you?
The whole level, you are just blowing through geometry. Some of it, by the very design, you might not ever see because it's in a time period that maybe you're not traveling to. So that part of it was phenomenally taxing, I think, on the team, on every department. I mean, the frozen explosion is a perfect example. I have a video of my bad level design blocked in version of that, and then what was delivered by art, by effects, by audio. I think I cried the first time I saw their version of my bad version of that. The whole thing was definitely a big black hole of resources, and it was quite a relief that it ended up making any kind of impression, because I was just scared that it wasn't going to, and then people would just say, yeah, well, that's the last time we helped you out with any of your levels. There's a room in the final level that originally, I think it was some kind of mall, because we had imagined the campus being much bigger. So this was kind of like an employee amenities wing. I made a room partially based off an artist's geometry block out of what that could be, repurposed it towards kind of like a concourse, kind of a mall. As the level went through iteration after iteration after iteration, that room sort of morphed into this sort of cryo prison where instead of being a mall, it was these frozen prisoners in big pallets or on these little rotunda structures. Not only that, but it had these inexplicable platforms that went from one area to the other that were sometimes there and sometimes not, depending on what time period you were in. And it was just like a perfect example of a level designer delivering just incomprehensible geo to the art department and say, I think this is a cryo prison, but it used to be a mall. Can you help me out here? The floor also needs to be some sort of lava, because if the player falls, he needs to die. It's just like, it was a horrific piece of geometry that I handed to art. I mean, the final result is absolutely breathtaking. It does look like an evil cryo prison, but the upshot of it was that Todd Sue, our art lead, had mentioned to me that he ended up using that same horrific geo as an art test to kind of hand to future artists that we were going to hire and say, like, hey, someday some designer is going to hand you something like this and you're going to have to make it beautiful. What do you do? So glad I could help.
kale, so I bet there's gonna be something in my teeth. Let's check. Well, there it is. Look at that. Had to avert your eyes for a second.
This is definitely making it into the video, by the way. Todd, thanks for joining me, mate. Tell me about Jake Keating and the geo for the cryo prison in Effect and Cause. What kind of state was it in when it first came to you?
I mean, it was basically an atrocity to art, right? But we ended up making it work out all right. I mean, let's see. It was just floating boxes that would appear and disappear. The ground was just like infinite death.
And how common is it that a designer is going to give you geo that incomprehensible, or is it something that only Jake could have pulled off?
We do from time to time get geometry like that. Jake is he's kind of known for it, but I mean the stuff that he does is great. And if the design is there to back it up, then we usually work really hard to make the design a reality, right? You know, sometimes if there isn't a whole lot going on there on the design side to justify it, then you know we'll push back and try different solutions. But we knew the gameplay was good on his level, and so we just did everything we could to support that.
Great. Thanks so much, Todd. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Good luck. Can't wait to see you.
All right. Thank you. See you, Todd.
Later.
What is this place?
The IMC has multiple scientific research facilities throughout the frontier. However, this particular one is unlike any known to the militia.
And then Steve Fukuda, the game director, and the writer, Manny Hagopian, and everybody else that was involved had to kind of pick up the pieces and say, okay, I guess we're going to have a level where houses are getting manufactured, and we're going to have a level where you're wall running on a ship, and one where you have a time travel device, and somehow we need to merge these together into some sort of coherent story. I think about that a lot, how the story sort of reflects the game design philosophy we had in creating it. So you have all these crazy ideas that are super playful, they're super Mario World type of mechanics and things that don't take themselves too seriously. And then you have the story layered on top of it that also, you know, it's a real world and it's a real story, but it also doesn't go out of its way to take itself too seriously. Definitely from my perspective, I think the entire team would agree that that whole Titanfall 2 project was just a huge learning experience for everybody. I think especially for people that came from the modern military setting, where we were able to kind of move out of that scripted sequence moment and more into the pure gameplay moment. So it was almost good to have that delayed gratification and not be able to do a single player game for Titanfall 1, because I think it just made people hungry for a different type of game. It gave us time to reflect, so that when Titanfall 2 did come around, it was almost like a modern mentality again, where you had this ready-made engine. It was a shipped game. It didn't have all the single player components, but it had a really good Titan motion model and combat. Same for the pilot. And we were just kind of given this set of ingredients to say, like, hey, see what you can do with this. And so in that way, I think the whole team definitely stepped up and made a pretty memorable experience that was really focused around pure gameplay.
Jake, I've heard members of your own team and many throughout the community call Effect and Cause one of the best moments in gaming in the last decade. What goes through your mind when you hear that kind of praise?
Honestly, I think it's relief. I wish I could say pride and happiness. But I think it's relief. I mean, going back to what a black hole that level was for every department. I mean, always when you're doing any kind of collaborative game development, especially as a designer, you're kind of saying, hey, here's an idea. I think it's good. Trust me. Please give me all your resources. Please spend endless hours and crunch on this art or on this effect or on this these animations. But if the level ends up resonating with people, my initial reaction is like, oh man, thank God, because now I haven't wasted everybody's time with all these assets that they've poured and love and sweat and tears that they've poured into the level. But then after that fades, like, for sure, I'm happy that people are digging it and that so many people are enjoying the entire campaign. It just feels great. It feels like we made something special for sure.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you found some of Jake's insights as fascinating as I did. But at the start of the video, I said Effect and Cause was one of the highlights of the decade in gaming. But what other moments in the 2010s do you think give Effect and Cause a run for its money? Let me know in the comments below. But while you're here, check out my interview with the lead designers at Infinity Ward about their work creating Modern Warfare 2019's best level, Clean House. And if you'd like to see the channel grow, please share this video, give it a like, and leave a comment. It makes a huge difference to the algorithm gods. But until next time, see ya.